My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm 67 years old, and at my only son's funeral, my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "Pack your bags and get out. Go grieve somewhere else." The air around me went cold. The sound of people talking blurred into nothing. In that moment, the woman who had married my son only 2 years earlier, the woman I had tried to love like my own daughter, pushed every ounce of grief I had into something sharper, something that cut deep. My boy, Marcus, had been buried not even 24 hours. My hands were still trembling from laying flowers on his coffin, and there she stood in black designer heels, with another man behind her, smirking, like my pain was their fresh start. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just stared at the woman who had once called me Mom, and realized she never saw me as family, just an obstacle. I walked away that day, but not because I was weak, because she had no idea what was coming next. If you've ever been treated like you didn't matter, if someone's ever tried to throw you away like your love was disposable, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Because what Tiffany didn't know, what no one at that funeral could have guessed, was that the house she thought she'd just claimed had eyes. And when the truth finally came out, the same police who shrugged at Marcus's death loved what they saw. This is the story of how a grieving mother stopped being a victim and made sure that the people who stole everything lost it all. I've spent most of my life as a high school teacher. 35 years of dealing with rowdy teenagers, early mornings, late nights, and fighting for every bit of respect I earned. I'm a widow. My husband died young. I raised Marcus, my only son, on my own. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every extra shift I picked up, it was for him. Marcus wasn't just my son. He was my pride. The kind of man who called his mother every Sunday without fail, who showed up with flowers on Mother's Day, who worked hard, made it, and still remembered where he came from. So when I opened the door that gray Tuesday morning, just a day after we buried him, and saw Tiffany standing there in her black designer dress with a fresh blowout, my heart cracked a little more. She wasn't alone. Behind her was a man I'd never seen before, tall, broad shoulders, work boots, hands shoved in his pockets like he already owned the place. His smirk told me everything I needed to know. Tiffany didn't even wait to be invited in. She just pushed past me like this was already her house. "Dorothy, we need to talk," she said. Her nails clicked against her purse as she gestured around the living room like it was a property listing. I didn't say a word. I just watched the woman who once kissed my son goodnight, now standing in my foyer with her new boyfriend, ready to erase me from the home Marcus gave me. I'd faced disrespect before. I'd faced grief. But this was different. This was war. It was 3 months before the funeral, a night I'll never forget. Marcus had taken me to my favorite little restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, just a cozy Italian place where the pasta always tasted like comfort and the waiter always remembered my name. He looked different that night, lighter, like a man whose dreams had finally caught up with him. "Mom," he said, leaning across the table, "I have something special to tell you." Marcus had spent years building a tech company from the ground up. I'd seen him work late nights, miss parties, eat cold dinners, but that night, his eyes were bright with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen since he was a kid, building his first computer on our kitchen table. "They bought the company," he said. "I signed the deal. $47 million. I didn't say anything at first. My hands just covered my mouth. $47 million. My son, the same boy I'd raised on a teacher's salary and homemade casseroles, had become a millionaire overnight. And," he continued, with that mischievous smile I loved so much, "I bought you something." The waiter brought out a little blue envelope instead of dessert. Inside was a set of house keys, polished and warm in my palm. "Marcus," I whispered. "It's yours, Mom," he said. "The Maple Street house. The one you always walk past on your evening walks, 3 bedrooms, big kitchen, and a garden in the back. You've sacrificed your whole life for me. Now it's your turn to rest. I started crying right there at the table. Not because of the house, but because of the way he said it. The pride in his voice. The love in his eyes. Across from us, Tiffany sat quiet. Perfect makeup, perfect posture. A polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself she was just tired. But now, looking back, I realized that was the first red flag. She wasn't smiling because she was happy for me. She was calculating. "Tiffany," Marcus said, turning to her. "She deserves it. She raised me alone." "Of course," she replied sweetly. But her hands were clenched tight around her wine glass. A week later, I stood in front of the white colonial house with tears in my eyes and the keys in my hand. It wasn't just a house. It was every struggle I'd survived. Every dream I thought I'd given up. I didn't know it then, but the same house Marcus gave me out of love would become the battlefield where his wife would try to erase me. I still remember the exact time the call came. 2:17 a.m., a Tuesday. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why Marcus hadn't called like he promised. When the phone rang, and I saw unknown number, my heart already knew something was wrong. "Is this Dorothy Williams, mother of Marcus Williams?" The voice was calm, too calm. "Yes, this is Dorothy. I'm Officer Patterson with the state police. Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been an accident involving your son." I sat up so fast the lamp nearly tipped over. "What kind of accident?" I whispered. "A single vehicle collision on Route 47 near Miller's Bend. The car left the road and struck a tree. I'm very sorry to inform you that your son was pronounced dead at the scene." The world tilted. My hands went cold. Marcus, my boy, my heartbeat. Gone. Just like that. I don't remember much of the hours that followed, only the sharp scent of disinfectant at the morgue. The way the fluorescent lights made his skin look pale but peaceful. They said it was instantaneous. No pain, just darkness. The funeral was arranged in a fog of grief, but something deep in my bones wouldn't let me rest. Marcus was careful, obsessively careful. He'd watched his best friend die in a drunk driving crash when they were young. He didn't drink behind the wheel. Not ever. When I went to the police station a few days later, I expected answers. What I got was a polite wall. "Mrs. Williams, the toxicology report shows a blood alcohol level of 0.12. It was a tragic accident." "That's not possible," I said firmly. "My son didn't drink like that." The detective gave me the kind of look people give when they think grief has made you irrational. "Sometimes families look for explanations when there aren't any," she said softly. I walked out of that station with my hands clenched into fists. Maybe everyone else was ready to close the book on Marcus's life, but I wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Tiffany had barely cried at the morgue. Her tears at the funeral were perfectly timed, like they'd been rehearsed. And behind those tears, I saw something else in her eyes. Something cold. It was the same look she'd given me 3 months earlier, the night Marcus handed me those house keys. Only this time, it wasn't jealousy. It was calculation. The police called it a drunk driving accident, but I called it the beginning. The morning after the funeral, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums inside your bones. I'd spent the night walking through each room, touching the walls like they were part of Marcus. His laughter still lived here. His scent still lingered in the hallway. I was making a cup of tea when I heard the sound of heels on the porch. Sharp, confident. Not the sound of someone coming to grieve. When I opened the door, Tiffany stood there in black, like she'd stepped off a runway, not out of a funeral. Her makeup was perfect. Her eyes were dry, and right beside her was a man I'd never seen before, tall, broad, leaning against the porch post like he owned it. Work boots, faded denim, a smirk that didn't belong at anyone's front door, least of all mine. Tiffany didn't even ask to come in. She brushed past me like a gust of cold wind. "Dorothy, we need to talk." she said. About what? I managed to whisper. About the house, she replied, tossing her hair back with practiced ease. Rick, here's a contractor. We've been talking about a few renovations. I froze. The house. Marcus's house. My house. Tiffany, I said carefully. Marcus gave me this house. The deed is in my name. She laughed, then a sound so sharp it felt like glass splintering. Oh, honey, there's so much you don't understand. Marcus regretted that decision. He told me everything. Said he was going to fix it. My chest tightened. Marcus had never said any such thing. I knew my son. Rick stepped forward, crossing his arms, oozing false charm. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, lady. Either way, we're moving in. I gripped the edge of the door frame, steadying myself. I just buried my son, I said softly. Can I at least have time to breathe? Tiffany checked her phone like she was bored. You have until Friday. Rick needs to start on the kitchen. We're going open concept. They left as casually as if they'd just dropped off a package. The truck roared down the street, leaving silence in its wake. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Then something shifted inside me. They thought I'd be broken, but they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. I sat at the kitchen table Marcus had picked out for me when we moved in the same table where he told me, Mom, this house is yours now. You'll never have to worry again. But now, just days after burying him, the woman he'd married was trying to bulldoze me out of it. Grief had been sitting in my chest like a stone. That night, it turned into something else. Steel. I pulled out my old address book. There was one name I hadn't called in years. Helen Garcia, a friend I used to teach with. She'd married a private investigator after she retired, and if anyone knew how to quietly fight a dirty game, it was Helen. She picked up on the second ring. Dorothy? I heard about Marcus. I'm so sorry. I need a favor, I said. My voice was steady. A big one, and I need it to be quiet. By noon the next day, Helen's husband had stopped by with a small black case that looked like something out of a spy movie. Inside were 4 tiny wireless cameras, no bigger than shirt buttons and a backup hard drive. Place them where they won't look twice, he said. And don't tell a soul. So I did. One in the living room, hidden behind the bookshelf. One in the kitchen, tucked near the light fixture. One in the hallway, facing the front door. And one in Marcus's old office, the room Tiffany had already bragged would become Rick's man cave. When Friday came, I packed my suitcase slowly, letting them think they'd won. Tiffany arrived in her black SUV with Rick grinning at her side. We really appreciate you being so understanding about this, she said, fake sympathy dripping from every syllable. Of course, dear, I replied sweetly. I just want what Marcus would have wanted. They hugged me at the door. She even kissed me on the cheek like a viper pretending to be gentle. I walked out without looking back. But my cameras? They stayed. I drove 6 blocks down, parked outside a coffee shop, opened my laptop and logged in. And there they were. Tiffany and Rick walked through my house like they owned it, laughing, opening bottles of wine, tossing their shoes onto the sofa. And then, between the laughter, came the first words that made my blood run cold. The old lady bought it, Rick said. Insurance money should hit in a few weeks. And if she gets suspicious? Tiffany replied. Then she'll have an accident too, he said, smiling. I sat there with my coffee going cold in my hands, my heart pounding not with fear, but with clarity. They'd killed my son. And now they were plotting to finish the job. But this time, I was listening. The footage replayed in my head all night, Tiffany and Rick in my living room, laughing over their plan like my son's death was nothing but a business deal. I didn't cry this time. I just stared at the wall, my mind sharper than it had been since the day Marcus died. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was short. Careful driving, Dorothy. Roads can be dangerous for someone your age. I sat up straight, ice crawling down my spine. They weren't just celebrating what they'd done. They were threatening me. For a few seconds, fear gripped me. But then something shifted inside. I'd spent decades as a teacher dealing with bullies who thought they were untouchable. Tiffany and Rick, they were just grown-up bullies. And I'd spent my life learning how to handle those. The next morning, I called Helen again. "They've made their move," I said. "Good," she replied calmly. "Then now you make yours." She gave me the number of an attorney who specialized in financial and criminal fraud cases. Patricia Reed, sharp as a blade, no patience for games. I sat in her office later that day, hands folded in my lap as she listened without interrupting. When I finished telling her everything, Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Dorothy, the footage you have is strong, but defense lawyers can argue it was recorded without consent. If we want to bury them, we need a clean confession, something they hand us, gift-wrapped and admissible." Her words settled into me like a plan taking root. For weeks, Tiffany had been the one pulling the strings. Now it was my turn. "Can it be done?" I asked. "Oh yes," Patricia said. "But it has to be your move. We set the trap. You lure them in." That night, for the first time since Marcus's death, I slept. Not peacefully, but with purpose. They thought I was just a grieving old woman. But soon, they'd learn I was also the one holding the knife that would cut their lies apart. Patricia Reed moved like someone who had seen human nature at its ugliest and decided to meet it with paperwork and patience. Her office smelled of coffee and old case files. She listened to my story, then folded her hands and said the thing I needed to hear. "Your cameras gave us probable cause," she said. "But defense counsel will try to poison the well, claim the recordings were illegally obtained or tampered with. We need a confession they can't throw out. We need him to say it in a place where the law treats his words as admissible." We planned the trap with surgical care. Nothing flashy, no vigilante theatrics. Just a public meeting, witnesses who could testify to voluntariness, and the police standing by. Patricia coordinated with Detective Collins discreetly, the same woman who'd first been politely dismissive at the station, but who had a backbone when presented with a clear, lawful plan. Detective Collins agreed. Get them to talk in a public space, with officers legally observing and recording. That keeps everything tight for court. I wasn't the sort of person who knew how to bait criminals, but I did know how teenagers reacted to a challenge, how bullies needed their egos stroked until they made mistakes. We'd use Rick's arrogance against him. The setup was simple. An abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, public property, easy for officers to watch, but quiet enough to coax a man into talking. Patricia and Detective Collins picked the site. We prepared a burner phone and a fake problem that promised to fast-track Rick's next job. I typed the text myself, hands steady now where they'd trembled at the beginning. A man named Jimmy, one of Rick's shady contacts identified in my camera footage, would be the lure. I sent Jimmy the text from the burner. "Problem we talked about. Meet me at the old Hartwell at 3 p.m. Come alone." Jimmy passed it to Rick, as predicted. Rick's ego made him believe he could handle it. On the day, I arrived early with Patricia, Reverend Morrison, a local pastor who'd witnessed for me, and 2 plainclothes officers who would stand a short distance away, phones on record. Tony, Helen's nephew, who'd wired the cameras before, set up a tiny mic near the meeting spot that the detective could control. Every step was coordinated. Where Rick would park, the path he'd take to the door, the exact place detectives would move in. When Rick's truck rolled into the lot at 2:58, his shoulders were the same hard set I'd seen on my porch. He stepped out, looked around, then pushed open the warehouse door. The echo of his boot steps swallowed the sound of the wind. I stepped from the shadows before he could see me. He blinked. "Mrs. Williams?" he said, too casual for someone meeting a stranger. "You're a long way from home." "I'm here to talk business," I said. My voice was quiet, even. "You and Tiffany are clever, or at least you thought so." He grinned, scanning the empty hall like a man who expected money to be waiting. "Cut to it. he said. What do you want? I gave him nothing. Instead, I played him a little of what he already thought he knew. I told him I'd heard he had a problem with a bank and needed help to push through an insurance claim. Ego flared on his face. He liked to be the fixer. Okay, he said, leaning forward. We help. We take care of it. We clean it up. What's the number? He tried to negotiate terms like a businessman. That's when Patricia, who'd been sitting within earshot but out of sight, signaled with the slightest tilt of her pen. At that same moment, Detective Collins' 2 officers eased closer, but stayed concealed behind a rusted shipping crate. Rick settled in, started to unspool, voice lowering as he let arrogance become confession. He told stories about the insurance plays, the little pushes to make accidents look real. He name-checked locations and a method he preferred for staging mechanical failure. He laughed about it, the way cruel men laugh when they think no one moral is listening. And then, like a man who needed the performance as much as the profit, he began to describe Marcus not as a human being, but as an obstacle. He got suspicious, Rick said aloud, loud enough for the mic to catch. We gave him something, puffed him up, made him think he could handle his money. Then, one night, boom, clean, quick, each syllable fell into the recorder like a nail. I let him run on. He provided names, places, the timeline. He was giving us exactly what Patricia had asked for, a voluntary, public confession. When the words were there, Detective Collins moved. Officers slipped out of the shadows, announced themselves, and took Rick into custody. He was stunned, rage and panic flickering across his face as handcuffs clicked shut. In his hurry to sound powerful, he'd built a rope he couldn't untie. As they led him away, his eyes met mine for a second pure hatred. And something else, a dawning understanding that he had underestimated an old woman. Patricia gave me a look that contained equal parts relief and steel. One down, she said simply. The phone in my pocket had recorded everything. The officers had body cams. The mic had captured his voice clearly. We had our clean confession admissible, public, irreversible. It wasn't the end, but it was the moment the whole case tipped from suspicion into prosecution. And for the first time since Marcus's death, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Not revenge, exactly, but the heavy comfort of truth being finally in the right hands. The sound of the handcuffs locking around Rick's wrists was cleaner than I'd imagined it would be. Sharp. Final. For weeks, his laugh had echoed in my house like a stain on the walls. Now it was replaced with something else: panic. Detective Collins stepped forward, firm and calm. Richard Patterson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent. His jaw clenched, but his mouth kept moving, spitting curses as they dragged him toward the cruiser waiting outside. I watched from the shadows of the warehouse door, my fingers curled around the cool edge of my jacket. When his eyes met mine, there was nothing charming in them anymore, just the dawning realization that an old woman had destroyed his perfect plan. Patricia touched my arm lightly. Dorothy, she said, we got it. This is a clean confession. He's not walking away from this. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Because Rick wasn't the mastermind. Tiffany was. And she was still in my son's house. The detectives worked fast. By nightfall, Rick was processed, booked, and sitting in a cell. He tried to act tough at first, but Patricia had warned me. Men like him always crack when they realize their girlfriend might throw them under the bus to save herself. He started talking. Details. Dates. Insurance policies. Tiffany's real name. Their little murder-for-money operation stretched across 4 states. By the next morning, Detective Collins called me into her office. Mrs. Williams, she said, sliding a recorder across the desk. You might want to hear this. Rick's voice played back, low and furious. She planned everything. Tiffany's the one who picked the targets. I just made the accidents happen. Marcus was supposed to be our retirement. She's not innocent. I closed my eyes. My hand tightened around the edge of the chair until my knuckles ached. I had suspected it, but hearing him say it, hearing how coldly they'd decided my son's death was like reliving the funeral all over again. "We have enough to bring her in," Detective Collins said softly. "But Dorothy, she's going to fight. Hard. Then, let's fight harder." 2 hours later, Tiffany was pacing her living room, my living room, when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Detective Collins, 2 uniformed officers, and me standing on the porch. Her smile was flawless. "Detective," she said sweetly. "What's going on?" Collins held up her badge. "Tiffany Williams, we need to speak with you regarding new evidence in the death of your husband." Tiffany laughed, a practiced, calculated laugh that had probably gotten her out of trouble all her life. "Detective, this has already been investigated. Marcus's death was an accident." "Ma'am," Collins replied, "you can come with us voluntarily, or we can do this the other way." I stepped forward, slowly. Tiffany's eyes flicked to me, mocking, then curious when she saw the calm on my face. She didn't know. Not yet. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice tightening around the edges. "Watching justice come home," I said. She didn't smile after that. At the station, the recording of Rick's confession played through the speakers. Tiffany's expression flickered shock, then fury, then calculation. But she recovered quickly. She leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other like this was just another spa appointment. "Rick is lying," she said smoothly. "He's trying to save himself by blaming me. He's obsessed with me. I've been terrified of him for months." It was the performance of a woman who'd lied 1,000 times and expected the world to believe her. But Collins didn't even flinch. Then Patricia gave the signal. I pulled out my phone and hit play. "Maybe Dorothy needs to have an accident too." The sound of Tiffany's own voice filled the room. Sharp, clear, recorded straight from my hidden cameras. Her mask slipped, just for a second, but it was enough. "That's not me," she snapped. "Rick faked that. He's trying to set me up." Patricia leaned in. "He's not the only one, Tiffany. We have your financials, your burner calls, your insurance applications, your boyfriend's confession. This is over." The officers stood up in perfect sync. "Tiffany Williams, also known as Jennifer Walsh, you're under arrest for first-degree murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud." For the first time since Marcus's death, Tiffany didn't have words. She just stared at me wide-eyed, furious as they cuffed her. "You meddling old. Save it for the judge," Collins cut in. I didn't look away as they walked her out of the room. I wanted her to see it in my eyes that she hadn't broken me, that I was still standing. Outside the precinct, the wind was cold, but it didn't bite the way it had in the weeks after the funeral. Patricia joined me on the steps, hands in her coat pockets. "This is the beginning," she said. "Not the end. Trials are long, but she's going away for a very long time." I nodded. "That's all I need." And for the first time since that awful Tuesday morning, I took a deep breath that didn't hurt. They'd stolen my son, but they weren't going to steal my justice. The trial wasn't quick. Justice never is. It stretches across months of hearings, witness statements, filings, and sleepless nights. But the day the case of State v. Tiffany Williams and Richard Patterson officially began, I walked into the courthouse with my shoulders straight and my head high. Not because I wasn't scared I was, but because my son deserved nothing less. The courtroom was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through your coat and into your bones. Reporters lined the back wall, not because I was anyone special, but because Tiffany and Rick's crimes had grown much bigger than anyone in our town ever imagined. Their case wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about 6 other victims. The detectives had spent months combing through Rick's financial records and Tiffany's aliases. They'd traced a pattern that stretched across 4 states: older partners, sudden inheritances, convenient accidents. They had left a trail like vultures feeding off love and trust. Rick sat at the defense table with his lawyer, looking smaller than I remembered, less like the smirking man who had threatened me, and more like a man facing the end of his own story. Tiffany, though. Tiffany still wore her mask. Black suit, pearl earrings, perfect posture. The kind of woman who could convince strangers she was the victim if they didn't know better. But this time, everyone knew better. The prosecution opened strong. Photos of the victims, financial transfers, insurance policies, and then they played Rick's confession. His voice filled the courtroom exactly the way it had filled that warehouse. Cocky, careless, damning. You could have heard a pin drop. Tiffany's jaw tightened, just slightly. Her defense attorney objected, but the judge overruled. "The confession was obtained lawfully and voluntarily," he said. Then came the moment that made my chest tighten, the footage from my house. Tiffany's own voice. Maybe Dorothy needs to have an accident too. Hearing it in the quiet of the courtroom made it even uglier. A few people in the gallery gasped. Tiffany didn't look at me, but her knuckles whitened where they gripped the table. When it was my turn to testify, I stood slowly. My knees ached, but my resolve didn't. I took the oath. I told the court about my son. About the night he gave me the house. About the funeral. About the day Tiffany and Rick tried to erase me from my own life. I didn't cry on the stand. I spoke clearly, calmly. Every word was a brick in the wall I was building between my son's memory and their lies. The defense tried to paint me as a bitter old woman, too fragile to understand complicated grief. I let them, because every cross-examined question was answered with the same quiet truth. And truth doesn't shake. Over the next 3 weeks, the trial unfolded like a carefully built puzzle snapping into place. A financial analyst traced the $2 million insurance payouts over the years. A forensic toxicologist explained exactly how the drugs found in Marcus's system didn't match anything prescribed to him. The private investigator, Helen's husband, testified how the cameras had been legally installed in my own home, making the recordings fully admissible. And finally, Rick turned on Tiffany completely. Desperate for a deal, he gave the prosecution everything. He told the jury how Tiffany had picked Marcus, how she'd whispered promises to Rick while marrying my son, how she'd slowly isolated him from friends, then planned his death down to the last glass of wine. She was the brains, Rick said. I just made it look like an accident. Tiffany broke on the 12th day, not with tears or apologies, but with rage. When the prosecutor cornered her with the 7th insurance policy she'd forged, she snapped. "They were idiots," she shouted. "All of them. Lonely, rich fools who handed me everything." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge's gavel seemed unnecessary. Her mask had finally cracked in full view of everyone. The verdict came 6 days later. The jury didn't even need a full hour. Guilty, on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. Rick got life without parole. Tiffany, too, but there was more. The evidence they'd uncovered with Marcus's files helped reopen other cold cases. In the months after the trial, 4 more families got justice for their loved ones. My son's courage, his quiet investigation, had saved people even after he was gone. I visited his grave the day after the sentencing. The autumn leaves were scattered across the grass, gold and orange against the gray stone. "We did it, sweetheart," I whispered, laying down fresh flowers. "They'll never hurt anyone again." With the insurance money Marcus had redirected before he died, I did what he would have wanted. I set up the Marcus Williams Foundation, a fund to help families of homicide victims navigate the justice system. We'd already helped 3 families in less than a year. I bought a smaller house across town, quiet, with a garden out back. I still keep the old house, not as a home, but as part of Marcus's story. A reminder that monsters can hide behind pretty smiles, but they can be brought down. Sometimes, late at night, I sit by the window and remember the woman Tiffany thought I was. Old, fragile, easy to break. She was wrong. I wasn't weak. I was a mother. And a mother who's lost everything is the last person you should underestimate. My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm 67 years old. I buried my only son, and I stood alone on a porch while the woman who married him told me to pack my bags and go grieve somewhere else. But here's the thing they didn't know about me, about mothers like me. Grief doesn't always break us. Sometimes it turns into something sharper, stronger. And that strength? It put two monsters behind bars for life. I fought them with the truth, with the law, with the kind of quiet power people mistake for weakness. And if you've ever felt small, underestimated, or like the world moved on without you, listen to me carefully. You are stronger than they think, and your story matters. So if you're watching this right now, I want you to do 3 things. Hit that subscribe button because stories like mine deserve to be heard. Like this video so it reaches someone who might need to hear it. And most importantly, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Let's remind the world that justice doesn't have an age limit, and no one gets to silence us. This isn't just my story. This is every parent who's ever fought for the truth. Every soul who's ever been told to grieve somewhere else. We rise. We fight. And sometimes, we win.